to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. Thanks for listening, sharing, and subscribing to this podcast. And if you want to continue to support us in other ways, we have a Patreon, and you can always leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. It goes a long way in helping support and sustain this podcast and get those stories out there. Today, I have the privilege of being in conversation with a policy mover and a data shaker committed to social impact. Please welcome HyeSook Chung, the president of the Baltimore Civic Fund. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Rob. So glad to be here.
Thank you for coming on and making the time. And, it was one of those things where, we started this initial conversation maybe back in March. I'm like, all right,
yes,
and what's going to be the perfect time to make it happen? And now we're here. So this is going to be really cool. And so sort of the start off, I like to, sort of lay that foundation as to who the person is and sort of what their story is a bit. And, I gave sort of the cut and paste intro, and I like to give you the space to introduce yourself. And I have a second sort of bullet point in there, but I want to give you the space to introduce yourself because I think that there's a lot of strength in it, a lot of power in that. When people introduce me, they'll say, Rob Lee, and I'm like, I'm the voice and the talent behind The Truth in This Art. Very weighty, right? So I think it's something about that. So if you will, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm so honored, Rob. I just seeing myself in this space, again, I was surprised, but also delighted just having seen the guests that you've had before. And I've never seen myself as an artist, but I've been told I dabble in the fiber arts. And so I'm definitely seeing myself as a blossoming artist. And my name is HyeSook, like you said, and I am the president of the Baltimore Civic Fund. And I have the pleasure of just working day to day to think about big social problems in the city, to help the mayor and the agencies, think of creative ways for tackling some of the hardest issues that confront our residents. And so prior to coming up to Baltimore, I served as a deputy mayor for Health and Human Services, as my kids would say, just tackling some of the most persistent, long social, service issues that confront our residents, like homelessness, and mental health services, and access to affordable health care. So that's kind of my thing. I think and dream of a day when all of our kids and residents in Baltimore can have just access to everything they need to thrive and be the person they want to be in all aspects of life, including the arts, including in the jobs and, in the creative space. And so I get to do that every day. So it's just a thrilling job, and I have a great team, and I'm just so honored to be able to do this work.
It's great. And you're doing the much needed work, and your team. And and in sort of being from here and being invested in the community, you want, people to have the best possible situation to really thrive. And, when in talking to artists and talking to people where those sort of intersections of arts, culture, and community all kind of come together, all of these things matter. So a lot of the work that you're doing and what the Baltimore Civic Fund and your team are doing, it matters to various people within the community.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. And if you think about it, I think some of these challenges that we confront as residents and as people in the space of creative arts and creative, problem solving, some of these things are just unsolvable. And so I think the more creative you are and think outside the box, and the more kind of the meeting of the minds to bring different strategies, different ways of thinking about some of our persistent, concerns that our residents are confronting. I just think what better way to tackle some of these things, because in my 24 years I've been working, we still haven't addressed child poverty. And I get asked all the time, like, after 24 years, you don't see anything. I go, I certainly do, but politics and a 4-year cycle and cash always, get in the way of all of us wanting to do the right thing. So, unless we have people like you and I persistently asking the question and having this conversation, we're not going to solve, any of the things that we need to solve for.
Yeah, and one of the big things you mentioned there, with all of the big things,
Mhm.
the meeting of the minds. I think
Yeah.
being able to have different folks, different perspectives, and being able to shake things up. Policy mover, data shaker.
Yes. Yes.
It's important.
Yes.
So I want to step backwards a little bit. And so I'd like to get sort of the origin story. I'm into comics. I'm a nerd. I will say, for some people will say it's their what is their canon event, for the
Oh,
Spider-Man
I
parlance.
love it. Yes.
So what would you say is like an early experience that
Yep.
kind of, maybe shaped or maybe directed or even sparked that interest in sort of social advocacy, and ultimately maybe something that led you to the role that you're in now, the Baltimore Civic Fund?
Oh, that's a great question. And because I have young teens, I am obsessed with the Marvel. And like, I love watching the origin stories of all the superheroes. And boy, do I have an origin story. I was thinking about this, and I have to like shout out my mom, who has been just a great role model in service to others. I grew up watching her as a role model, working in the nursing home space and just being a nurse's assistant, but also just caring for seniors in just the most tender, loving way. And I just having her bring me to volunteer, play the piano, or read books, and just seeing her kind of tender touch. I've been around that most of my life. And so when I went to graduate school, I always had a gravitation. You could ask my kids. I just love babies. And I see a baby and kind of do this, crazy, can I hold your baby thing? And I've always loved babies. And after graduate school, I went to BU to get a master's in nonprofit management. Afterwards, I started right away and working in public health at the Boston Public Health Commission, and worked on a couple of really at the time what I would deem innovative, in the sense that these, programs weren't being implemented. We launched the Universal Home Visitation Program, knowing that when newborns come into a family, how fragile and how tender, like the bonding, but also just life skills that you need to really be able to create a home environment and a bond with that child. And, if like formula companies get it and send, massive products to their home, why can't we? So we created a universal home visitation project. And we took it to scale, city, statewide. You got a home visit as soon as a baby came home, and gave you the education about parenting and bonding. And that was amazing. And I think I just kind of I remember just thinking, like, every child born in Massachusetts is going to get something I wrote, and to help their mom or dad, like, bond with them better, be better equipped to be the parent they want to be, so that their child can have access to everything they dream or imagine, no matter what zip code, right? No matter where you're born. And it was exhilarating because it was at a very macro scale. There were certainly challenges taking anything new and make it a statewide program. But I think that was like what really bit me and like drew me in. But it wasn't until I moved to DC, where advocacy, and like every this, Rob, every interest group has lobbyists. So advocacy and lobbying to me are the same thing. And when I worked at a think tank called 0 to 3, and a benchmark book came out that published brain scans of toddler, well, maybe 3 or 4 month old babies, around their mass capacity in their brain, and what that showed in terms of the growth of the brain wiring and synapses that really form a child's ability to form language, form relationships, create trusting bonds. An image of a child in an impoverished zip code was just blank. While the density in a brain scan of a more affluent family with access to books and literature and parents who engage in conversation, their brains looked so different. And recognizing that most of those wirings and synapses form how you succeed as you grow up. I think that like just stopped me in my tracks and thought, oh my goodness, here's the evidence that really show like it really does depend on where you're born and who your parents are in order for you to succeed, and how awful and what injustice, when a single mom, 18-year-old has a baby and is so destitute that she doesn't have the resources or even the support from her family to raise a child, and that child starting off so behind already, if you will, and so I think those were kind of the two phases in my, I guess, early on in my career that really moved me to think, this is kind of where I want to go. This is what I, for lack of a better terminology, my calling. I really want to make a difference for children. And I was lucky enough at 0 to 3 to work on a benchmark project that was launched. I don't know if you've heard of Head Start, which is a low-income project, intergenerational, two-family generational project, really focused on the family, but also just everything really. It's a very comprehensive family support program, everything from health, work and education. And at the time, this was in the late 98, 99, we implemented early Head Start. So we were actually going younger, prenatally to 2.5, so that they can then transition to Head Start. So it was outstanding to be part of the team that wrote and implemented and took to scale and put the RFP out. It was amazing, exhilarating, and I loved that opportunity. And that was it. That was it for me. I was like, yep, I'm a child advocate. I'm sticking with this. Until our kids are better off in this world, I'm stuck with this, or they're stuck with me.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's important. Again, it's, when you see sort of, and the thing that really stuck out, you mentioned the sort of brain scanning and seeing being that, just like, oh, we can go like anecdotally. It's like, no, here's verifiable stuff that this is what's happening. And, I see it on occasion, and I look at folks, and I've had this in this sort of like podcast and being I guess a public figure, which I'm still uncomfortable with.
No.
And people will say like, you don't seem like you're from here, and I'm from here. I'm from Baltimore, because I don't have X, Y, and Z. And it's sort of like, I don't have the accent, or I don't approach things in a certain way. And it just shows sort of that sort of difference. And I say that in that, being around, like, having both of my parents, and it's not saying that someone who didn't, wouldn't have that sort of scenario or certain lifestyle, but it's just go about it differently. Or even I look at, even my brother, what have you, we had the same, household, right?
Yeah.
And, I might go in this direction and do this. I chose podcasting. He chose, I'm going to be a dad. He chose the very different thing. This is my kid. This podcast is my kid. But just kind of seeing how we approach things maybe differently, and sort of the people we're around. And we had sort of, in my opinion, maybe the sort of a more traditional like setup, and having both parents and not having some of the challenges that a lot of people encounter. It wasn't like we had the deck stacked against us. And, you learn as an adult and talking with your parents, like, oh, no, it wasn't great. It wasn't easy. I was like, oh, that's what was happening. You never know those things. But, I had this perspective and sort of this matriculation as an adult that, I didn't have sort of that bearing as a younger person, that it didn't carry over into me being an adult. And I just have a different perspective, I suppose.
Yeah, you're lucky. You're very lucky.
Very.
Yes, you need to thank your parents.
I do.
Good.
And I think backwards at times of like these different forks in the road. It's like, if this situation was weirder, or if it was more challenging, I might have taken left when I should have taken that right.
That's absolutely right. And you're like, and you've given, you have not only the experiences, but the language and the relationship with your parents, that you can have this kind of relationship you have. And that's wonderful. And so, every child born deserves like what you and I have had, just, and they're right. I mean, I think being a parent, and you go through this with your podcast, it's the hardest and most humbling. Any baby of yours, any baby project, any child of yours, it's the most humbling, but also the most rewarding, and so I'm sure they would have horrific stories about, trying to teach you the life skills you needed to be where you are. So yeah, and trying to institute that in programs and policy. I mean, imagine how hard that is.
So that brings me to sort of this next question that does ping in on the challenges that are there.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking back, it can be recent, it can be further back, but is there a challenge that, really sticks out in this sort of transformational sense and, that it has shaped sort of your approach to advocacy, to policy and, kind of still influences you today?
That's a great question. I think it's interesting because I think as a professional in lobbying, I was fortunate enough to spend most of my career in DC, and regardless what people say about DC, there's the federal DC, and then there's a local, the District of Columbia, where I had the fortunate pleasure of serving the residents. And there is no question that advocacy, lobbying at any level is very political, very motivated by a lot of, I'm trying to be politically correct here, a lot of driven decision making. And I think fairly on in doing the work and sitting around, meeting rooms and boardrooms and seeing just how I was a minority, not only female, but also a person who's had direct practitioner experience, that most of the people writing the policies and programs, everything from expansion to, education programs to preschool programs, were white privileged men. And I was, it was profound thinking, these, what I would deem non-experts are writing about what we institute locally, and so part of my role was not only when Early Head Start was written into a policy program, but I had the pleasure of going in the field and helping newly awarded, especially Native American migrant branches of Early Head Start, but also really big urban city Early Head Starts. And I think just the overwhelming sense that it is just really hard to implement quality programming that impacts day-to-day individuals. And, it's quite a daunting task. And I remember just thinking back then, it's like this disconnect between the people who are writing these programs and policies and then people like us wanting to implement it. And then how come there's this huge divide, because as you can imagine, looking at data and evaluation is very, very, very quantifiable, and it's just very traditional evaluation. And and I know that so much about what we see and experience is culture and qualitative, and how do we provide that context. And so, I wouldn't say there was any one particular event, but I think early on I realized how we all were coming to the table with a different definition of equity, different definition of privilege, and how as I work and get, into these unique opportunities in positions where I can have some influence, and how we approach something or how we creatively problem solve, like how do I master that in a way that actually is a win-win for everybody. And so, and I also remember during the 8 years that Bush Jr. was president, how a lot of Head Start was, reorganized to go into this public education versus health and human services. And that was incredibly hard to witness because, though we want as an outcome of those programs that they can go into kindergarten and preschool prepared and equipped to learn, but to shift the health and human services program that was wholly comprehensive and family centric and about empowering two generational strategies that really kind of managed all of the needs of the family, then to turn it into an education program, that was really hard to watch and kind of see happen. And we're still impacted by it now, but I would say those were kind of the formative things that really kind of stuck with me, and I think really kind of inspire, challenge, motivate me now as I think about things and as I confront conversations, good or bad, and hard conversations with the mayor or with agency directors, funders, all of it. Like, I mean, I think one thing they would all say is that I don't hold back. I really say what I need to say to get to the issue at hand, which is, I think, especially in Baltimore, where poverty is so deep and the wounds are so deep, like, I hope for, with your leadership and people who really want to tackle some of our persistent issues, that we come to the table authentically and not so bombarded with political correctness that we're actually not solving our problems at hand. We have so much work to do in Baltimore, and our residents deserve so much more. So I just, I applaud the mayor for some of the creative ways he's doing, but we just have a lot more work to do.
Yeah. And definitely want to comment on that and give an example in that sort of from my spot, I suppose. Like, I started this because frankly, I got tired of just people taking weird shots at Baltimore, because you're talking about the people, people who, it's racially tinted, all of the things.
Yes.
It's socially tinted. It's, all of that stuff. And, at times when I see different things, like where I'm at, I am in the data industry in my day job. I'll share more with that off mic.
Oh, yes. I want to hear.
But I do that in the neighborhood I'm in. It's a food desert, right? And I've lived in this neighborhood. I bought a house in here, my old neighborhood. I grew up over here. So reinvesting, right? The thing that people say you should do, you get the money.
Yeah.
And, coming back to it, and I was like, not only has things moved out in terms of, we might have had a nice, Atwaters over here, get something kind of fresh.
Yeah.
And that stuff sort of moves out. And I started asking questions, and I realized that, people don't like answering questions as to why is this happening. And even in sort of the day job dynamic, people don't have a sense of like how big I am in real life. I'm 6'4", right? I'm a large dude, right? So when I'm asking something and it sounds 10 times crazier, like, what do you want again? So And I'm one of those people that I don't like to play the game. I actively don't like to play it, but I've gotten a bit more savvy. And I think in having conversations and interviews and being able to talk to a lot of different people, it's just like, I'm here for the information. And I think one of the other things that you touched on, the political correctness of it all, I think there's a line where, a lot of times you'll hear, let's say in this podcast space, right? White dude bros just, hey man, why can't we just say terrible things? It's like, you shouldn't, because it's bad. But I think in some instances, when we do sort of this, what we think is politically correct and so on, we're just using a lot of words to get to a point, and we haven't really said anything. And I see it in meetings all the time. And, because I'm a little bit of a troll, I wanted to do a bit combining some of the artist statements and bios that I get from folks. Just be in character interviewing myself. I would just do some good editing. And I was like, I'm going to get in so much trouble for doing it, but this is what I encounter. And I'm like, is your work good? Is your work interesting? And that's sort of the thing, that it's like, can we kind of get to it and maximize our word count? Can we get to that? That was my aside of tightness, but it's real though. It is real.
It is real.
So I want to dive into the Baltimore Civic Fund. For those who are undipped, can you give us a bit about what the Baltimore Civic Fund is and share a bit about the mission?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. The Baltimore Civic Fund, formerly known as the Baltimore City Foundation, was, oh my gosh, I guess we're 43 years young now. Mayor Schaefer created us as a city's nonprofit. And really, our bread and butter, I would say, our primary focus is being a fiscal sponsor for our city agencies. But, as a macro kind of lens, as a mayoral fund for the city of Baltimore, we're a nonprofit that allows us to create and focus on private-public partnerships, innovative financing projects, innovative grant opportunities. I think Mayor Schaefer's vision was really, where there are challenges in moving anything in government, where can a nonprofit supplement and help so that we can empower agencies to do what is needed and to ask the hard question. It's like, if city itself can't do it, then what do we need to build so that we can at least try? And so my staff, my CEO always tease me, like, I'm always like, let's roll up our sleeve. Like, the biggest challenge, bring it on, Mayor. Ask me anything to solve anything, any big thing, and I won't say no. I'll try to fix it, And so that's the huge opportunity that we bring for the city, and we oversee over 123 projects for the city, managing between $25 million, mostly philanthropic, but some city and state and federal dollars. I see this unique opportunity for the Civic Fund to kind of play this role as a hub to connect and coordinate city programs in the philanthropic community, kind of dabble in innovation and new things. And what I love is just the challenge of being able to be a rapid response for the city. And we, like you said, I think one of the draws to Baltimore was, like, no one was saying anything positive about Baltimore. And I had a couple options, and I said, hey, I'm going to go to Baltimore. And I have loved every minute of it. I bought and moved into the city. I've been working here for 4.5, almost 5 years now, but I bought maybe 3 years ago. And I've loved every minute. I love the grit. I love the people are so nice. And I just, there's not a part of the city I haven't explored yet. I mean, there's more to see, but and the food. And so, and as we work with the 127 or 25 programs, we manage everything. When I say manage, really the fiscal sponsorship piece, the contracting, the different, financing mechanisms in place to do any project, which is like fundraising to making payments to vendors. We manage AFRAM, we manage Youth Works, we manage a lot of summer youth programs for rec and parks. And then we've started some grant making for the mayor and the city. The mayor had a vision of really ensuring that our nonprofit communities, especially nonprofits that are really embedded in the communities, we know there are challenges of trying to access federal funds because of the compliance-driven requirements. And so we lifted up a grant program to ensure that they had accessibility, but that it wasn't easy process. They weren't burdened with the federal, that we did the heavy lifting around the compliance work so they could receive the money and really do the work needed in the communities. And so, we've been able to innovate in a lot of different ways. And when I started, we were a team of 1.5, and now we're a team of 9 with a CFO and a comms contractor. And it's been, the mayor's keeping us busy. So I love it. I just really enjoyed, and just sky's the limit for us. And as long as the mayor pushes us to do more for residents, we'll be growing and doing more. And it's been really rewarding. And the team, I'm just really proud of the team. And just last week, we launched the first cohort of the digital equity grants, and working with 22, just small to mid-size community-based nonprofits, just wanting to do so much, and they, just to be among them talking about the work that they're going to do, just I hope you look into it, because there's just going to be so many awesome things happening out of that network of nonprofits doing work. So and making sure that everybody in church basements to civic centers to you name it, we're gonna try to get 5G there for them so that everybody has access. And so our senior centers, and so we're really excited about that. So yeah, I just, I think my background in philanthropy and my background as deputy mayor and civil servant, like, just is a really great combination. And I've been privileged to work here. So I look forward to the many more things that we're going to do for the city.
That's fantastic, and definitely something to be proud of as far as the recent initiative. That's really cool. And it actually kind of knocked out. You made my job a little easier. Knocked out one of my secondary questions. So shout out to you for knocking it out. So on that, I have one that I added in here because I'm into how can I put it? Like, as an Aquarius, as a proud Aquarius, I'm into the sort of unconventional, right? So could you, like, is there like a project that comes to mind that has been like super unconventional that you're like, no, I think we can support that. I think we can help that. And padding here, but in thinking it through, like, one of the things that I keyed in on is sort of being able to provide that support, doing that heavy lifting. A lot of times, and I reach out to folks and I'm like, all right, I don't speak fundraisers, if you will, in philanthropy in that way. So, if there is a partner potentially that does that sort of stuff, can you help me bring this? Because I'm already doing this work, but this work costs this. And and really trying to, like, paint that thing, and people are very apprehensive to do it because it seems like it's more work or whatever, but it's an easier lift for them. And I like that you were touching on that. That's sort of the support that I shouldn't say BCF because that's not the acronym, right?
No, we go by Civic Fund. Civic Fund.
So for the Civic Fund,
that's a great question. What comes, there a couple things come to mind, but I think one thing I want to challenge us as a city is just what do we expect from our nonprofits? And then if we're going to hold them up to a pedestal to be the servant organizations, the servant leaders we expect them to do to help the city really manage a lot of programs needed by our communities, and what are we as philanthropists and government doing to support their success? And I would say that we're not doing enough, and we're not doing enough in the right way. So I have been, because it's my personal, not vendetta, but my personal project, is to challenge our thinking around, if we want them to succeed, what would it take? And then really having hard conversations with nonprofit leaders to say, like, what they need and not be nervous about it, and then actually investing in what they articulate for us. And so we were able to take a little bit of ARPA and the CARES money to provide some technical assistance for 20 of the nonprofits that we awarded, and had them go through different phases of development in terms of their fiscal sustainability planning and, like, governance planning. And it was illuminating, Rob. It was illuminating. You can't. I was surprised at the depth of knowledge and education some of our nonprofits needed to actually be financially sound and long-term, meaning that they were not going from grant to grant, but that they had a reserve of 3 or 4 months, that they had the governance structure they needed to really be able to dig into the work and not so much be distracted by all the administrative things and the lingering all over. So, I think because we're not 100% government and we're not 100% philanthropy, I think there's a little bit of creative space here for us to be able to be the broker of some really hard conversations and to have these trusted allies. Like, we know we have to earn the trust of these nonprofits, and we've been working with a couple of them for over a year and a half, and their testimonies and their feedback to us have been amazing. And to be able to give them what they need, or at least try to carve out what they need and partner with philanthropists on the ways that they need us to be. We hear loud and clear that they need more general operating, multi-year grants, that they need a lot more support and leadership development and continuity in leadership. They need TA that's not just a consultant to create more work for them, but a TA that's authentically going to provide them the skills and the tools that actually the TA creates those things and leaves them with them, instead of creating actually more work for the executive, And so these seem so minor to us, but I don't think as leaders in our spaces that we think about this in an authentic way, because at the end of the day, what I want to say is kind of like this concept of design thinking. If we're human-centric, if we're child-centric, if we're executive director-centric, actually the design of the programs would look very different than how things are now, right? Because if we want the ED to succeed, we're not making decisions about a report that person has to have or produce, or that, we're actually thinking, how are we going to ensure this executive is going to succeed? And what would that take? We need to support her physically, mentally, psychologically. She has all those supports, so she needs a coach. We need to support her so she has the back support, like bandwidth. Does she have the right finance team, right? And so it's a different way of thinking about approaching how to support a nonprofit, right? And so I think there's things in our community that are being done that have little remnants of some of the things I've been thinking about and what we're learning. But I don't think, there's a comprehensive way or any single funder doing all of the work needed to do this. And so, we've been trying to be thoughtful, do some writing and thinking with some of the funders. And so I hope that one of the things in legacy projects I can provide is just how to think about just ensuring that our nonprofits succeed, because I do think we put so much burden on them to help us help our residents without really providing the supports they need to do the hard work. And so I hope, I hope we can get closer to partnering with all the different stakeholders so that nonprofits indeed can succeed. And when they succeed, government will succeed and residents will succeed.
Yeah, no, thank you. That is great. Because I can say from my vantage point, being on one of these sort of listening tours, one of these calls from a nonprofit, and they wanted to get a take from folks that are in sort of the creative community and the arts community. Is this grant amount good? Does this fit? Is this actually helping? Or is this process more challenging? And really sort of thinking outside of it. And I think ultimately they were able to put in some of these changes, sort of the key large changes that came along, within a year. So that got them, at the time they were looked at like, we don't know if you guys are going to do anything, at least from folks in the community. And seeing this sort of work come in, it's not like, the biggest jump, but it's like going from, this grant was 3,000 last year, now it's 4, or this grant may have been 3,500, now it's $6,000. And it has these different sort of requirements, but it has this notion that we're listening and this is within the bandwidth of what we can do. But, when I have these conversations, because I'm doing this, it's not a free project, but I do this and I'll reach out to folks and it's like, I find myself taking on sort of another role and trying to articulate it. And I'm, like I said before, I don't speak fundraisers, but, when I, talk with folks and just kind of get insight from them, because you're able to, have conversations. So they'll speak on some of their challenges of being understaffed, being overworked, and sort of not having resources to serve in that way. And that trickles down and impacts folks that are doing goofy podcasts or folks that are doing really great murals and things of the sort. Yeah.
For sure. You will never meet so many well-intended, mission-focused individuals than in a nonprofit space. We don't most of us don't do this for money or for prestige. We do this because we are caring individuals who, are driven by mission. So,
Yeah.
I hear that. I hear that. And that's why there are times when I don't sleep well, because I kind of, brewing all this in my head. But, it's our calling.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
have two more real questions left, and then
Okay.
the fire ones.
Oh, okay.
So this one feels very businessy, but I think it's an important question though. And it comes to mind because I started teaching a class, the second class I've done, and teaching podcasters. So I was espousing to them, like, don't get caught on the numbers. It'll make you not want to do it. It can be very,
yeah.
disheartening.
Yeah.
So could you speak on what success looks like from your vantage point, whether it is in terms of impact, in terms of sort of financial metrics, but what does success look like?
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. I've been asked before, someone asked in a different way, which was after 24 years working in anti-poverty and 2 generation, like what works?
Yeah.
And then, my obsession with data. And, it's interesting. I came to the data space and kind of the space thinking like data would help us, at least define what success would look like or metrics would look like. But I soon realized that actually so much of the social service space actually won't and can't be measured by, like I said earlier, quantifiable data in the traditional sense of like scientific knowledge and scientific, data points. I think it's hard. It has to be contextualized. And also there has to be, I believe strongly, because there's so much rich history in everything we do in our communities, that there are our grandfathers and our resident, gatekeepers, they have to paint the picture of why a certain metric would be important. And so for me, in success for like residents, some will be very easy. Did we fill potholes fast enough? Did we reduce crime? And some of that stuff, they're very kind of linear, kind of simple data points that actually we can just see progress or decline, over time. I mean, those are easier, right? Those are pretty straightforward. But, and the mayor has a whole dashboard where he's looking at some things over time. The harder things for me to define as like success is like when we know in the state of Maryland, like 12% of our children under 18 live in poverty, and in Baltimore alone, 33%. That's 1 in 3 children living in poverty. And what we call a child living in poverty is the average income of a family of 4 is $24,000.
Wow.
That's according to Kids Count, which is a data project out of the Anna E. Casey Foundation. So shout out for Kids Count. But that, just seeing your reaction, that is the power of data.
Yeah.
Data does not lie. And I don't care when decisions are made. You can use data all you want, but that is so much of our decision making in government is about the vote and politics. And so you have to be careful with data, but I also think like we have to lean on data to really show the accurate picture of what we need to see. Just as we see in any budget, every annual budget, you see where the spending is. That is powerful to see. I'm kind of obsessive about municipal financing because that you follow the money and you know where things are going to be prioritized. And that is the same way. And over time, I would say, like, have we changed that 33.3% on children living in poverty? We haven't in a long time.
Right.
So if we want to change anything, that would be the metric, the one metric, because it is going to be so, so hard to move the needle on. That is where I would just, pay attention closely to over time, because our investments in, babies is going to impact how they do in preschool and then how they do in third grade, where all of the milestones, big test scores and, reading proficiency, math proficiency in third grade is going to dictate, your trajectory to college and all these things. So there's enough evidence that we need to lean on some data, but I also think like we can't let that lead the conversation. That alone is not going to lead, because you and I both know a lot of outliers. I'm a parent of immigrants, or a child of immigrants. I mean, my parents did everything they could, but they didn't know what they were doing. It's just like your parents. They did the best they could with the information they had. And now my dad keeps crying whenever he sees me, because he's defined success in me. I don't know what that looks like, but he says I'm successful. So, I think it's complicated. I think it's really complicated. And if anything, over the 24 years I've worked, it's been humbling to know that we, as much as I've worked in the space and as much as I've advocated for things, and yes, there are programs we implemented, we increased, CHIP, we've increased, family or WIC, programs for nutrition for women and infants. We've increased those things, but that's not enough. This doesn't change the needle. It doesn't change the 1 in 3 living in poverty. That's going to take so much more investment and so much more comprehensive approach. And it's not just the money. I think that's this other illusion that I think a lot of us have in government, is like it's always about money. And I mean, there's some truth to that, but it's also leadership and public will. And do we really want these changes, or are we okay with the status quo? So I would say that it's not only about money; it's so much more than that. And so that's why if the tobacco and car companies could have lobbyists and advocates, well, why not children in poverty? They deserve more and much more, because as long as we don't invest in them, we're going to continue to have children living in poverty. And that's anybody who wants to go into space, I would be like, oh, can I raise 2 children who are going to, continue to do this work after I age out? And I don't know if either of them will, but I mean, I just want to like inspire the next generation of young people going into public service or choosing professions that really inspire them. And I hope there's enough of us moving forward to continue to focus on children, because they're our future. They're the asset that we neglect.
You did it again. You got
no.
You crushed my second question. So again, just making my job easier. So that's sort of that as far as the real questions go. Overachiever. I don't like it. I do like that. It makes my job easier. So with that, I want to move into the rapid fire portion of the
Okay, is this scary? Is this good for me or not good for me?
It's a thing.
Okay, bring it on. Let's do this.
All right.
Are you going to make my kids proud, or am I going to embarrass my kids? Let's see.
No, you're going to be good. You're going to be good. So it's 4 of them. As I like to give with everyone, don't overthink them. Whatever your answer is your answer. Okay. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Never Give Up, Rick Ashley.
Okay. Nice. Don't Rickroll me. What?
That's my son and I sing that song all the time.
Nice. What would be if you were to distill it down to one trait? What is the one trait that makes a great leader?
Integrity.
Okay. What is your favorite color?
Green and blue and purple.
You answered that like an artist. It's just like, oh, well, it depends. Here's my palette right here. I like that. This is the last one. This is one that might be controversial.
Oh.
When snacking, do you enjoy a salty snack or a sweet snack? And whatever one it is, tell me what it is.
You're going to be surprised. I get teased about this one all the time. I am a sugar fiend. And my favorite snack are not the almond, not the caramel, but the peanut M&Ms.
Oh no, those are good.
I know. See, yeah. Why?
we go to the movies. We will get a box of the
There you
peanut
go.
M&Ms, dump
Yeah.
them in there. Now
There you go.
I'm persnickety. I like the peanut butter ones a lot.
Oh, I have not tried those. I will try those next.
Those are very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a Japanese buddy who put me on to the sake Kit Kats, and it's just alcohol in it. I was like, this is delicious. I was like,
Oh, I'm gonna have to try that too. Ooh,
how can
I
I
like
get
anything with
imported?
wasabi. I like anything with wasabi. That kick, the fire kick. Oof. So yeah, I love it. But I, when I have stressful days, and I've been better now, but I will have like a 2 pound of peanut M&Ms in the stash and just grab a handful. And like if my staff walk in, if my assistant walks in, and I'm eating, they know I'm stressed. It's a sure sign that they have to stay clear from me for a while.
It's one thing I don't know if it still exists. It might, but back in the day, like maybe 10 years ago at this point, maybe a little less, but Lay's did those flavor combinations of their chips.
I remember those. Those were
wasabi,
controversial.
they were delicious. The chicken and waffle was terrible, but the wasabi ginger slapped. It was like my favorite chip. It's
that's
very
awesome.
good.
They don't have them anymore, so that's crazy.
I'm gonna talk to a guy. I'm gonna get somebody on the blower. Like, look, man, I'm gonna need those chips back. So that's pretty much it for the pod. You got off the hot seat. You beat the rapid fire portion.
Oh, thank you. That wasn't so bad. Okay, what's your favorite color? Let me get over it. Go ahead.
It's gray. It's gray, actually.
I was gonna say blue, but gray. Okay, all right.
Blue used to be my favorite color. Blue used to be my favorite color.
Okay.
I was a big Ninja Turtles fans, and Leonardo was the guy. So
he was the guy. He was the best. Yeah, we went through the turtle phase too. So
I realized.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I realized as an adult, I'm more of a Raphael than anything else.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, no, we can't do that.
This is aggressive. It's kind of like the controversy aside. It's kind of like you might like Michael Jackson when you're younger, but when you become an adult, it's like Prince, right? That's who I'm here for.
Yeah. That's a hard one. That's a tough one. Yeah. So yeah, that was my only regret. There were a couple concerts I wanted to go to, and Prince was one of them before I got too old, and I just never made it there. I was close when I was in high school, but I never got there. But I did go see a couple other shows over the last 2 years, and I had the coolest kids. My son, his first job and his first present to me were Tears for Fears tickets. I know. That was pretty cool. He knew I couldn't go when I was younger because my parents didn't let me, and he bought me tickets. And then my daughter took me to Smashing Pumpkins, so that was cool too. So they have good taste in music. What can I say? What can I say?
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it for the pod, and I'm going to give you the space in these final moments. Show the show component. Tell folks where they can check out the great work that the Baltimore Civic Fund is doing, and to follow you, to check out some of your fiber work if you're putting it online.
Oh boy. Please visit us at baltimorecivicfund.org. Our website's being revamped, so check it out over the next few weeks. It's going to feature a lot of the projects we're working on for the mayor and the city. And, I welcome feedback, conversations. I try to focus on customer service. So anything we get, good, bad, or ugly, we respond to. And so just, as a resident and as in service to all of you, just reach out. We're here to serve. And for my fiber arts, I've been knitting. I've always been a visual arts person. I love going to galleries. I love, museums. But as someone who was sitting in a lot of meetings, and I needed something tactile, and I didn't want to get over caffeinated, knitting was my go-to. So I started knitting about 22 years ago, and you will often catch me knitting in, in council meetings or in board meetings. It's a great way to stay focused. And I'm fortunate enough, my son's interested, so I've taught him. My daughter was interested. I taught her. They're not sticking with it, but I at least expose them to them. And it's just been a great joy. And now that our biggest spokesperson is Michelle Obama, who's knitting away. now knitting has been just a tremendous source of comfort. So you can find me on Ravelry, which is our social media for knitters. It's HyeSook Chung. And you can see my 500 plus sweaters and hats and things I've knit for designers, and my love for fiber arts. So I haven't thought of myself as an artist, but when you reached out, I like, I am a fiber artist. I used to knit. I knit a lot. I don't do commission work. It's just too much work, but I knit for designers who test patterns, and I knit a lot of gifts for my mom, who is so knit worthy and wears everything I make, regardless of how well made they are or how beautiful they are. She wears everything. So I just appreciate that. And this has been such a pleasure. I'm not, I tend to be, as a public figure like you, I tend to be quite on the down low. I like to keep, just focus on the work to get done. So I don't often have the opportunity or even asked to talk about kind of my journey and my story. So it was really quite a pleasure. And just thank you for asking such thoughtful questions, because really at the end of the day, it's meeting people like you and talking about the things I talked about today with you that really motivate me to stay focused and driven to still see some impact that we hope to see for our residents. So thank you.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank HyeSook Chung for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around Baltimore. You've just got to look for it.